Yo, welcome back, fight nerds and dirty gamblers. I am Erik, and this is Erik Bets Fights. Tonight we're going to do our full card preview for UFC 270. We're going to do a quick breakdown of each fight and then also talk about the bets I've got for the fights. I don't have a whole lot of bets for this card, so I'm kind of going to talk about some leans and just kind of some bets that I was looking at since I didn't really end up pulling the trigger on much. I got to have something to talk about, so I'll talk about just kind of my breakdowns and what I think. If you were going to make a bet, what bet might you look at making? I hate that I'm getting this video out so late. I always seem to get this video out late, but that's just the way it plays out. I don't know how y'all get your tape study done so early. I mean, I've got a full-time job and a family and stuff, and I know I mean most of you do too. I don't know how you get your tape study done. It takes me all week to finish it, but excuses, right? Anyway. I usually start at the bottom of the card and work to the top. That's how I prefer to do it. That's how I prefer for the podcasts I listen to do it. But I know that all the evidence shows that people prefer that you start at the top and work your way down. I guess that's because casuals want to hear the main event. They just want to stick around for the main event. They don't want to stay till the end. They want to hear that first. And I know at this point in time, I'm pretty sure there's no casuals listening to me anyway. If you are bothering to hear my thoughts on this, you're probably a pretty hardcore fan. But I'm going to try it from top to bottom once anyway and just see how it goes. So with that, headlining fight is, of course, Ciryl Gane versus Francis Ngannou. I mean, what can you say about this fight that hasn't already been said? On paper, it's, potentially one of the best heavyweight matchups of all time, if not the best heavyweight matchup of all time. I mean, I think you could argue that Ciryl Gane might be the most skilled heavyweight we've ever seen. I'm willing to say Ciryl Gane is probably the best heavyweight in UFC history. I don't mean he's the greatest, because that kind of means something different. He doesn't have the accomplishments yet to be called the greatest heavyweight. But as far as his actual skills and what he's capable of, I think he might be the most skilled heavyweight we've ever seen. And I'm going to go ahead on record right here on this video and say that I think when everything is said and done, Ciryl Gane will be considered the greatest heavyweight of all time. Maybe Francis will prove me wrong tomorrow night. And then, of course, Francis gets kind of underrated, which is a weird thing to say about, somebody who is the champion and who has the reputation that he has. But what I mean by he gets underrated is people like to think of him as this freakishly athletic power puncher, which is exactly what he is. But I think people think his game stops there, and it really doesn't. There's a lot more to his game than that. And, people look at this fight as, the breakdown is either Francis is going to land a punch early or Gane is going to win the decision or possibly finish Francis late. Those are reads that make sense to me, but I don't think that this fight is that simple to break down. I don't think it all exists just on the surface like that. But anyway, let's get into it. Like I said, I don't have a lot of bets on this card. I'm going to start right off with a bet here. This is what I did. I initially bet Ciryl Gane in this fight at -110, and I did that pretty early on, quite a while ago. I put 3 units on it, and it was before I had done a lot of research, but I was scared that the line was going to move, and I wanted to beat that, so I put 3 units on him at -110, and the line did move quite a bit. He's sitting more like at -150, I think now. He was up as high as -160, but I think it dropped down again a little bit. But then after doing more tape study, okay, that initial bet on Ciryl was based on my read that obviously a lot has been said about how fleet of foot Ciryl is, how athletic he is, how quickly he moves for a big man. People say he moves like a middleweight, and then they start saying he moves like a welterweight, and it just gets a little out of hand. But yes, he has excellent maneuverability, footwork, evasiveness for a man of his size. So my initial read here was that Ciryl was going to be able to use that movement, that evasiveness, that footwork to stay out of the way of Francis's dangerous shots. That's a tall order to do for 25 minutes, but I thought if anybody can do it, Ciryl can. And, if he can keep moving and kind of tire Francis out, I thought maybe, Francis stays dangerous, but, I thought we would see Francis's output and his power perhaps drop down as time goes on. And so if Ciryl could just kind of survive the early onslaught, that he might be able to take over. And I was willing to bet that at coin flip odds. But then the more I looked into the fight and the more tape study I did, I saw this one particular tendency in Ciryl that made me nervous. He is as maneuverable as he is, as evasive as he is, but I think he trusts in that a little bit more than he should. You'll see a lot of instances in his fights. He tends to, when his opponent is coming forward and throwing power shots, you'll see this in the Rosenstrike fight, for example. Cyril likes to move backwards with his chin in the air and his arms down. He trusts in his head movement, his footwork, his maneuverability, his speed, his quickness. He trusts in that enough to get out of the way of shots. You don't actually see him covering up. You don't see him defending. You just see him evading. And he'll back straight up doing that. Eventually he does circle off, but we'll see him back straight up for quite a while, and then when he's getting to the cage, for example, he'll circle off. And he's been able to get away with that so far. He was able to get away with it against Rosenstrike. Obviously, we can draw this one parallel between Rosenstrike and Francis. Rosenstrike is obviously a power puncher who comes forward aggressively with big punches. Francis does the same thing, but that's really where the comparison ends. Francis is a lot more athletic, a lot faster, a lot more explosive, has a much bigger reach. So especially early in the fight, before Cyril has had a chance to figure out that distance and figure out that reach of Francis, because Francis has a freakishly long reach, and he has that ability to be explosive and close distance very quickly. I think there's a very good chance that when Francis is able to come forward, I mean, even like we saw Francis do against Rosenstrike, people kind of make fun of that because he had some kind of crazy flailing punches going on there. But in the end, who cares what the punches looked like? He was able to land and he was able to finish Rosenstrike. Even if it's an ugly, windmilling, flailing onslaught like that, if Francis comes forward with that speed, with that reach, with that explosiveness, and Cyril Gane is just trusting in his evasiveness, trusting in his head movement, and trying to move straight back without covering up, without trying to protect himself, I think Francis is going to clip him. And he's got 25 minutes to do it. So once I saw that tendency and thought about it, I was like, you know what? I don't believe in... I'm not saying Cyril can't win. I do think it's a close fight. I just... luckily, the line moved in my favor, and I was able to hedge out of that initial Cyril Gane bet by putting a bet on Francis at plus 135. He was up as high as like 140 or 145. I just missed that line. I just barely missed it. And you can get Francis by KO up as high as plus 160, or it was. I don't know if it still is now. When I bet him at plus 135, the by KO was at like plus 145 or plus 150. I thought about doing that, getting that extra value, but I was like, you know what? It's not that much more value, and just in case something crazy happens, I just like everyone else, I don't see Francis winning a decision. I don't see Francis subbing Cyril. I mean, those are things that are not very likely, but at the same time, I decided it wasn't worth the extra. I decided the juice wasn't worth the squeeze, and I just took his money line at plus 135. I just think we're very lucky for what we're in for to witness tomorrow night, that we get to see these two heavyweight combatants, two of the greatest of all time, get in there and do the damn thing. Francis is 35 years old, but that's not even particularly old at heavyweight. Assuming he sticks around in the UFC, we could see this fight happen more than once. Cyril Gane is, 31? Like I said, I think he is and is going to go on to be one of the greatest of all time. I'm excited to watch his career unfold, so I have goosebumps. I'm just really excited for this fight, you guys. I get really excited for almost every fight, but I love heavyweight MMA also, if you haven't figured that out about me yet. I love crappy heavyweight MMA, so imagine how much I like good heavyweight MMA. The next fight, the co-main event, another great fight. We've got Brandon Moreno versus Davison Figuereto. I stayed away from this one. This is a tough fight to get a read on, if only because there are so many question marks. In their first fight, we saw Figuereto, firing on all cylinders, we would assume, looking really good. In the second fight, we saw Figuereto just have a really flat performance. He didn't look good at all. I mean, it was pretty clear. If you compare even the first 30 seconds of the first fight to the first 30 seconds of the second fight, it's pretty clear right away that something just isn't working for Figuereto, that he's just not all there. And he said in an interview very shortly after the fight that he had a terrible weight cut, that he even knew, he knew going into the fight that he just didn't have it that night. And what are you going to do about it at that point, right? Obviously for this third fight, he has moved to Fight Ready. He's working with Henry Cejudo. Henry Cejudo has worked with Brandon Moreno in the past, so of course Cejudo said, hey, I've got the key. I know what Brandon Moreno's tendencies are and that sort of thing. I think Moreno has gotten a lot better since those days. Moreno is a very, very improved fighter. He's always getting better every time we see him. So while Cejudo may have some insights, I'm not as convinced as Cejudo is that it's going to make that big of a difference. I don't know if I'm convinced of anything as Cejudo is just in general, as far as just the way that guy thinks and the things he tends to believe. But that's neither here nor there. We're not here to talk shit about anybody, although we probably will from time to time. There's a possibility that that Figueredo's going to have some new tricks up his sleeve. Obviously, he looked good leading up to this fight. He looks like he's in really good shape. He didn't look like he had problems with the weight cut, but at the same time, he is 34 years old, and you're down around 125, 135, 145. Those guys rely a lot on their speed and their reaction time, and that's one of the first things to go when you start to get up there in age. So yeah, 34 would be a pretty common drop-off spot for smaller fighters like that, I think. So so we could see Figueredo having issues with weight cuts, or even, I wouldn't be surprised to see Figueredo move up to 135 and finish out his career there. If we knew that Figueredo was going to be firing on all cylinders, like with the way the line is right now, Figueredo is up at like plus 160, Moreno at minus 170. If we could be sure that we were getting a Figueredo who's going to be firing on all cylinders, I'd probably bet him there, because I'd consider the fight pretty close to a coin flip, and if I can get plus 160 on Figueredo, I'd probably do it. But with the question marks in this fight, it's just not something I feel comfortable doing. I don't feel comfortable laying that minus 170 or so on Moreno either. If you all have been watching my videos and following me for a while, you probably already know this, but I try not to be a terribly reckless gambler. I do sometimes pull the trigger on things that I shouldn't, but I'm getting better about not doing that. I'm still pretty new to this, so I'm learning every single time. And, if I feel like I don't have a strong read on a fight, I just listen to that. I don't try to force one. And so you'll see me pass a lot. Like, I don't make a bet unless, for example, the Caitlin Chukagi and Jennifer Maia fight recently. After watching tape on that, I thought it was okay. I would have lined Caitlin Chukagi up like minus 220 even, minus 240. So when I pulled up the odds and saw she was at minus 155, that was boom, boom, boom. I should have bet more on it, actually. I only put 2 units. But there are situations when I really feel like I have a strong read, I'll go make that bet confidently. I just didn't find those spots on this card. And so, I'm trying to be true to myself and not force any spots. I feel like I'm going to end up making a chalky parlay just to have some fun here, just because that's kind of how I roll sometimes. But I'm trying not to force any of these money line spots because I just wasn't seeing things that I liked. But anyway, we'll continue talking about what I was seeing. Moving on to the next fight, Michel Pereira versus Andre Fiolio. I watched some footage I could find on Fiolio. I wasn't really very impressed with him at first. I went back and watched a little more footage today, and there are definitely things to like about him and things not to like about him. Do I think he has a path to victory here? I kind of do. If I was going to bet this fight, Fiolio's money line sits at plus 230. I forgot to put in my notes here what his KO line sits at, but I did put, you can get Fiolio in round 3 by KO at plus 2,000. And we could see Pereira has shored up his gas tank issues a little bit, I think. Well, either he's fixed his gas tank issues, or it's simply that he's stopped using his energy the way he used to. Not that he doesn't still do backflips. He still does sometimes, but he doesn't, he doesn't get quite as crazy early in the fight as he used to with all that kind of stuff, where he used to, he'd be half tired by the time he got to the ring because he was dancing and flipping on his way to the ring, or the cage, excuse me. But here's what I put in my notes for this fight. Fiolio has KO'd his last 4 opponents in a row, and those opponents had a combined record of 43-13. So, these weren't all like high level fighters, but they're not scrubs either. Got those 4 together, 43-13. That's not too bad. One of those 4 was James Vick, who, what can you say about James Vick now? We could say it was the ghost of James Vick. I think Vick has been KO'd in like 4 of his last 5, so he certainly doesn't have the greatest durability. He's always kind of had a questionable chin, but still, that's That's a win that you can kind of hang your hat on. Fiolio does have pretty good hands. He throws hard. He does look to counter, and that's one thing to like about him in this spot, I think, is just because of the way Pereira fights, just because he does get kind of wild and crazy. There probably will be opportunities for Fiolio to counter. Fiolio tends to be kind of a slow starter. He doesn't necessarily throw a lot of volume until he starts to feel like until he starts feeling himself. If he sees an opening, if he sees that his opponent is hurt, he's definitely able to crank it up and kind of get it done. But he's not a guy who's always looking to put out a lot of volume and touch his opponent up and win a volume-based decision in that way. So I do lean Pereira here. But if I was going to bet this fight, I'd probably bet the underdog. I think Pereira, he's at like minus 270 or something. Let me take a look here. Yeah, minus 270. I wouldn't bet Pereira there. I wouldn't put him in any parlays either. He's not a fighter that I really want to trust with my money, especially not at those kind of odds. He's a good fighter, but he's just, you never know what the guy's going to do, you know. So I don't currently have a bet on Fiolio here, but I know some sharp people who do, and I don't hate that play. But it's not for me at the moment, but hey, maybe it's for you. Next up, we've got Saeed Nurmagomedov versus Cody Stamen. I don't have a bet here as well. Cody Stamen is a really popular underdog on this card. Some very sharp people are betting Cody Stamen. And I can see why to some degree, I guess. Stamen currently sits, his money line is up as high as plus 170 with Nurmagomedov sitting at minus 178. Even up to minus 200. Okay. Anyway, so yeah. Nurmagomedov is a pretty big favorite. If you see Cody winning this fight, I think you have to see it as a wrestling-based decision. If I was going to bet Cody here, Cody's at plus 165 on his money line. You can get him plus 225 by decision. If I was going to bet Cody here, I would probably go for that extra juice, get that meat on the bone with the decision, because I don't see him finishing Nurmagomedov. I don't see him winning here, actually. I do favor Nurmagomedov to win. And this is why. In order to believe that Cody Stamen's going to win here, you have to believe that he's going to be able to get takedowns and that he's going to be able to either get consistent takedowns or be able to keep Nurmagomedov down. The thing that gives me pause is that Saeed Nurmagomedov has 71% takedown defense, so he's got pretty good takedown defense. And using the Raoni Barcelos fight as an example, Saeed has really good takedown defense. If you watch that fight and watch when Raoni Barcelos is going for takedowns, Saeed has really strong hips. He's got really good balance, and he absolutely will not concede the takedown. I mean, sometimes you'll kind of see fighters fight it for a while, and then it's almost like they reach a point where they're like, it's going to happen. He will not. He will fight it and fight it and fight it. It's like the ground is lava. He does not want to go to the ground. So he does have pretty good takedown defense, and he will fight for your money as far as making sure he doesn't end up on the ground. But if you look at Cody's takedown stats, we've seen Cody attempt upwards. He's had fights where I don't remember which fights they were, where he's attempted upwards of like 10 to 12 takedowns in a fight. So he can definitely be pretty persistent with his takedown attempts. So if he stays relentless with it like that, maybe he could find success with the takedowns. And a lot has been said also about Saeed Nurmagomedov's tendency to throw spinning attacks. He does a lot of spinning. Obviously, when you're spinning like that, you're creating openings for, if your opponent is fast enough with that reactionary double leg, you're creating opportunities for your opponent to shoot in and take you down. So if Cody can capitalize on those spinning attacks, assuming we see those from Saeed, which we probably will, that might be one way that he's able to consistently find takedowns. But again, I stayed away from this fight, but if you're going to bet it, I would potentially look at betting Stamen by decision. I also don't hate the idea of parlaying Nurmagomedov here. A lot of the favorites on this card, I think their money lines are a little out of hand. With Nurmagomedov sitting at minus 180 or so. I actually don't mind that as a parlay piece. I currently don't have any parlays on this card, but it's possible I'll end up making one, and if I do, that might be a spot that I would be looking at. Next fight is Trevin Giles versus Michael Morales. I do have a bet here. Besides the bet on Ciryl Gane and the hedge out on Ngannou, this is actually the only bet I have on the card at the moment. I'm still going to be looking at some things tomorrow, and I may pull the trigger on an ill-advised jockey parlay or something, but so far I have not. So the bet that I put down here, I bet the fight doesn't go the distance. I got that at plus 120. I put 1 unit on that. And let me give you some numbers here. Trevin Giles has finished 12 of his 14 pro wins, and he's been finished in all 3 of his pro losses. Michael Morales is undefeated, and he has 12 wins. He has finished 10 of those 12 pro wins. This was against lesser competition, of course, but even so. And I do favor Giles to win here, but he's not a fighter that I like trusting with my money. I do think the money line is weird here, though. I know at one point Giles was up as high as like plus 125. Okay, he's sitting up at about plus 100 now. I think last I looked he was like plus 105. So that line has flattened out a little bit. I know you could get him at like plus 125 at one point, which I thought I sort of wish I would have bet that line. Like I said, I don't like putting money on Trevin Giles because I don't know how much I trust the guy, but having him a plus 125 underdog against a 22-year-old kid coming off the Contender Series does seem a little crazy, though. I mean, Michael Morales looks like he's got the goods, but like I said, he's 22 years old. This is a big step up in competition for him. Trevin Giles is a pretty solid and well-rounded fighter, even though he doesn't always make the best decisions and isn't incredibly trustworthy, but he's by far the best fighter Michael Morales will have ever fought. And so, you know, if you got Trevin Giles on that money line when he was like plus 125, good on you. I think that an argument can be made that that's a pretty good bet. But I ended up deciding that rather than trying to pick a side here, I was just going to go with the violence because I think that either way, I like Trevin Giles to win and I like Trevin Giles to finish. But by betting that it doesn't go to decision, I'm also covering that whole, you know, what if Trevin Giles implodes on himself and loses here, because he's been known to do that sometimes too. So, next up we've got Raoni Barcelos versus Victor Henry. I favor Barcelos to win. I think Victor Henry's a decent fighter. I don't think he's great. Raoni Barcelos is, of course, going to be by far the best fighter Victor Henry has ever fought. The money line is out of hand here. Barcelos is sitting at like minus 440. I wouldn't touch that. I wouldn't parlay that just in case something goes crazy wrong. Victor Henry is at plus 360, which is that a little off? Is there value there? Maybe, but I still wouldn't bet it. This card's kind of weird in that there are a number of underdogs where I do think there's value, so to speak. I do think that the line might be a little off. And theoretically, if you're betting those spots over time, if you're taking that value when you see it, theoretically, you're going to win in the long run. I'm not always great at considering the long run. I'm trying to win this event. You know, I'm looking at the event that's in front of me. I'm looking at the bets that are in front of me, and I'm trying to win those bets. And even though there might be value on some of these underdogs, I just don't see them winning. So I'm not going to be pulling the trigger on them, or I haven't so far anyway. I want to say that I think Raoni Barcelos finds a finish here. Victor Henry has 26 pro fights, and he's never been finished. He's also never fought somebody at the level of Raoni Barcelos. So Victor Henry is very tough. We know that about him. He's a pretty good fighter. He's got decent skills everywhere, but he's taking a huge step up in competition here. The over-under is set at 2.5 and is pretty much a coin flip. So, like, there's just nothing. Looking at all these different lines, even the props and stuff, I just don't see anything that has any meat on the bone for me. So this definitely ended up being a stay away. I would love to hear in the comments down there if any of you all have a stronger read on this fight or a bet that you'd like. I'd love to hear it because I just can't. This was one where I did a lot of thinking and I just can't find an angle that I like. Next up, Jack Della Madeleine versus Pete Rodriguez. This is a weird fight, and it should be a really good fight. This is what I mean by it's a weird fight. Jack Della Madeleine is the better fighter here. Hands down. Absolutely certain. No doubt about it in the world. Jack Della Madeleine looks like a pretty damn good fighter. From what I was able to see of him, I think he's got really solid boxing skills. He's really fun to watch. He hits hard. He's got great movement, great footwork, great just good boxing overall. He's just a guy who, when you see him in the ring, sometimes I don't even know how to like explain the details of it exactly, but you know how sometimes you see a fighter in the cage, and you just get this good feeling from them that they just look really comfortable, that they just look like they've got their game together, they've got their game face on, they've just kind of got it, whatever it might be. When I watched Jack Della Madeleine, I remember watching his fight against Andre Losa live on the Contender Series, and I just remember thinking, he's got it, whatever that it factor is. I think Jack Della Madeleine has it. Pete Rodriguez, there's not a lot of footage of him out there. And part of the reason that there's not a lot of footage of him out there is because he finishes all of his opponents in like a minute or two, which that's awesome. Good for him. He's only got 4 pro fights, and he's finished all 4 of those pro opponents in the first round. But those 4 people that he's fought at the pro level have a combined record of 8-4. So it's a winning record, but we're talking about 4 fighters here with only 12 fights total between them. So he hasn't fought an experienced high-level fighter yet in his career. In addition to those 4 pro fights, he has, I don't know how many amateur fights he has total, but he has 7 amateur wins, which are also all by KO, and all but one of them are in the first round. So the dude's got, a total of 10 first-round knockouts. So if you see where I'm going with this, do I think Pete Rodriguez wins this fight? No, I do not. If Pete Rodriguez wins this fight, how does he do it? By knockout in the first round. You can currently get Pete Rodriguez in round 1 by KO at plus 900. That is a fun sprinkle if you're looking for something like that. I haven't played it. I probably won't play it. But if you're the kind of bettor who's just looking to have fun, looking to put a little money on some fights just to kind of make them a little more interesting and spice up your Saturday a little bit, you could do worse than Pete Rodriguez by KO in round 1 at plus 900. But yeah, the way I see this fight playing out, I actually wouldn't be surprised to see Jack Della Madeleine find an early finish. But it's just hard to say because there isn't much footage on Rodriguez, and it's tough to get a read on him. But from what I have seen, I don't think the guy's UFC level. What does that even mean now in the COVID era, in the Apex era? And maybe he'll prove me wrong because it's hard to tell from the footage that's available. But I just feel like the signing of Pete Rodriguez doesn't make a whole lot of sense. Obviously, he's finished all of his pro fights. He's finished a bunch of amateur fights. He's got that factor going for him. He's got power. He's got finishing ability. But what else can we really see about his game? Obviously the UFC knows more than we do. They wouldn't have brought him in if they didn't feel like he should be there. But I also feel like he could just be a showcase opponent for Jack Della Madeleine because, I don't know if Jack Della Madeleine is necessarily a future star, but I think the kid's pretty good, and I think the UFC knows he's pretty good. So this could be one of those spots. But I think that's going to be a fun fight, and it's one I'm looking forward to. Next up on the card, we've got Tony Gravely versus Simon Oliveira. I like Tony Gravely to win here quite a bit, actually. But again, it's one of those where I think his money line is pretty much untouchable. He's at minus 240 is what I've got here. Let me see if that's still pretty much accurate. Where are you, sir? Minus 230 up to minus 250. Yeah, he's at minus 240 range. That's just the money line I don't like to touch. If I was gonna put together a parlay, and like I said, maybe I will, Tony Gravely might be somebody I look to parlay, but that's only if I'm doing a fun parlay that I'm not putting much on. Even when building a parlay, I'm not really trying to use a fighter's money line unless I think there's some value on that money line, and there's not. So I probably wouldn't even use it for that. But my basic breakdown of this fight, I like Tony Gravely to probably be able to find takedowns here and possibly even find a submission or like a ground and pound stoppage. Tony Gravely he's aggressive. He's got good wrestling. He's got pretty good striking too. one thing that gives me pause a little bit, Oliveira has 6 wins by guillotine, and he has way more wins by sub than he has by KO. But even so, one line that I highlighted here just as like it would be another like fun sprinkle kind of thing is you can get Oliveira by KO at plus 1,200. Do I think that's likely to hit? No, I don't. But we don't make those sprinkles because we think it's likely to hit. We make those sprinkles because maybe it will and because it's fun and it makes the fight more fun. So if you feel like putting 0.1 unit on Oliveira by KO at plus 1,200, because like I said, Oliveira has 6 wins by guillotine. He's got some submissions, which means he can work on the ground. And, you know, sometimes we see fighters who have good submissions find a situation where it makes more sense for them to unload with ground and pound and get a ref stoppage. And if that happens, they call that a KO. So could happen. Again, I'm probably staying away from this one unless I end up getting froggy and putting Tony Gravely in a parlay. Oh, only 3 fights left on the card, folks. Next up, we've got Matt Fravola versus Genaro Valdez. Another weird one. I feel like since I don't like the money lines on this card, I kept finding just like crazy props to sprinkle on. And like I said, I haven't sprinkled most of them just as far as like bets to talk about with you guys on this show here. But I do favor Fravola to win. But this is another of those fights where I'm just not interested in his money line. What does it sit at right now? He's at minus 190 up to like minus 200. What I would do with this fight, I would probably, if anything, look to bet it live, and this is why. Well, two of Fravola's 3 losses are by KO in round 1. Fravola is pretty hittable. And he's a fighter who can be stymied sometimes by forward pressure, right? We've seen him. He's a fighter who has a hard time getting his game going if you're backing him up. I mean, most fighters do, I guess, but I have noticed that about Fravola specifically. Valdez does bring that forward pressure, and we know that Valdez does like to come out and look for that finish in round 1. He's a guy who will go hard, both headhunting with punches and looking for takedowns. Basically, he can be really aggressive in that first round looking for the finish. 3 of his last 4 wins were finished in round 1, and the other one was finished in round 2. So, yeah, he is a guy who goes out and looks for that round 1 finish, and we've seen Fravola get finished in round 1. So, a prop that I think is kind of fun here, you can get Valdez in round 1 by KO at plus 800. Another sprinkle that I'm probably not touching. But one way that you could play this fight if you want to have some fun with it is sprinkle on that KO prop and then just keep an eye on the live line. Because if Valdez comes out and has a really good round 1, which that's kind of where he butters his bread is in that first round. If Valdez has a really strong round 1 and dominates Fravola, and we go into the break between round 1 and round 2 with Valdez way up, having won that round, we could get a good line on Fravola going into round 2. So that's definitely something I will be keeping an eye on. So if your book offers live betting, keep your finger on the live bet button for that one, I would say. And we finish up with 2 women's fights here. Next up, we've got Vanessa Demopolis versus Sylvana Gomez Juarez. I'm going to keep this one short. I don't have much interest in this fight. I don't have much of a read on this fight. I initially watched the tape a while ago. I watched more tape today. I don't have much of a read here. I just couldn't find anything that I could really sink my teeth into. As far as a possible fun sprinkle, I did see Demopolis by sub at plus 400. Demopolis does have good submissions if she looks to get it there. She is one of those fighters who I think has a tendency to fall in love with her hands a little bit and want to strike. But if she does, look for the takedowns and look to go to the submissions here, I think she could have success with that. I'm not touching this fight right now, but just something to think about is that Demopolis by sub prop. And finally, a fight that I do have some interest in, more than that last one anyway. Kay Hansen versus Jasmine Jasudavicius. Jasmine Jasudavicius. I was like practicing this earlier and I thought I knew how to say it, and now it seems like I've forgotten. Okay. I do like Kay to win here. Quite a bit, actually. I forgot to put her money line down. What is her money line at? Well, she's anywhere from minus 200 to up to like minus 250 even. I think actually on the book I was looking at earlier, I saw her at minus 220, minus 230, around there. I do like Kay to win a lot, but not enough that I feel great about betting that money line. She's someone that I might look to put, if I do end up putting together a little parlay just for fun, I will probably put her in there. I don't think there's value on that money line necessarily at minus 230, but I do favor Kay to win. I think Kay Hansen is just the all-around better, more polished fighter here. She's obviously got experience at the higher level. The footage I've seen of Jasmine is limited, but I'm not impressed with her skills from what I've seen so far. She's got that size, of course. She's going to be a lot bigger than Kay Hansen. I think Kay Hansen is like 5'2", 5'3", and Jasmine is like 5'7". I mean, she's the much bigger woman. She's going to have that reach and that size. However, I think Kay has the skills and the fight IQ to keep that reach from being something that Jasmine is going to be able to use really effectively. I think Kay has the smarts and the skills to, if something is not going the way she wants it to in this fight, I think she has both the fight IQ and the ability to bring the fight somewhere else. If she's getting pieced up on the feet, I think she's smart enough to recognize that and be like, you know what, I should really get this to the ground. Or you know what, I should stop striking at range. Although we've seen Jasmine be pretty good in the clinch as well. But you know what I mean. In general, I just think that I think Kay is the more skilled fighter here, has the better fight IQ, and even though she's the smaller fighter and Jasmine might be able to physically overpower her, which is one concern that I have, certainly, I just think Kay's, I think the skill disparity is so much in Kay's favor that I think that she's just going to be able to make things, I think she's going to be able to fight the fight that she wants to have. Because the main thing that I see from Jasmine, she's, like I said, she's got that size. She's scrappy. She's got that will. I mean, you just see, she's a fighter who wants to win. Every fighter wants to win, but you know what I mean. She's a dog. She's going to get in there and fight for your money. And so with that in mind, her money line sits at, last I looked, it was plus 190. Let's see if that's still about right. Yeah, you can get her as high as plus 200. I have seen some people on her, and again, I think you can argue that this is another dog where I think you can argue that there's value on that line. And, you know, going back to that theory that if you bet those value spots over time, ideally, theoretically, you will make a profit. But, again, I'm just looking at the card that's in front of me and the fights that are in front of me, and I don't like Jasmine to win this fight, so I am not going to touch it. So this was yet another stay away. But, yeah, I would say there's a decent chance that tomorrow morning I'm going to end up putting a parlay together. I mean, it'll be something I put like half a unit on or something, maybe a unit just for fun. And if I do, that parlay will likely end up being Kay Hansen, Tony Gravely, and maybe Saeed. So yeah, if I do, that's what I'll be looking at. Taking a look at those bets I have again. Yeah, I guess there isn't really much to recap here betting wise. I put those 3 units on Cyril Gane. Excuse me. And then I hedged out of that with 2.4 units on Francis Ngannou. So I make a small profit either way there. I think it's like 0.3 to 0.4 units or something. So I thought about just staying away and being like, you know what? I can already congratulate myself on UFC 270 being a winning event again because I'm guaranteed profit. But then I did end up putting that 1 unit on Michael Morales and Trevin Giles not to go the distance. As always, folks, you can find me on Twitter at Erik Bets Fights. You can find me on betmma.tips where I track all my bets. Also, if you want to see write-ups, it's pretty much going to be the same stuff that I just said out loud. But if you want to read those words, you can always find write-ups for my bets at my profile there, which is betmma.tips/erikblock. That's ERIKBLOCK. Make sure to check me out tomorrow and every Saturday that there's an event anyway. You can find me with a panel of 3 other guys, Brady from DFS by the Numbers, Uncle Wheezy, and Narco Cop. The 4 of us, every event day, will be on the DFS by the Numbers YouTube page doing a show called Best Bets, where We start 1 hour before the prelims kick off. So basically, you sit down and hang out with us. We, all four of us, go through the whole card, give you our favorite bet on each fight, and we end just as the card starts. So it's a place to come in and listen to some passionate and sharp gamblers talk about what plays they like for the card. So in case you want to get some last-minute degen action locked in right before the card starts, we'll give you an opportunity to do that. Once again, I am Erik, and this is Erik Bets Fights, and I'm reminding you to play it smart, play it tight, and let's grow those bankrolls. Thanks for stopping by, everybody. Have a good one.